You're listening to the Blue Collar Bible Guy podcast, where we discuss how we live for Jesus in this vast work zone called life. So grab your boots and a good pair of gloves because it's time to punch in. Hello and welcome back to the Blue Collar Bible Guy podcast. As always, my name's Mike and I'm the Blue Collar Bible Guy. Wherever you're listening, on the way to the job site, on a lunch break, working in the shop, I'm glad that you're in the Word. Today we're covering days 132 through 135. This is the book of Esther as we go through the Bible in a year. Now, a quick note before we dive in. Esther is one of only two books in the entire Bible that never once mentions the name of God. The other is Song of Solomon. No prayers recorded, no prophet speaking, no miracle announced. God's name is completely absent from the entire text, and yet, every page of this book is soaked in his fingerprints. The timing is too precise. The coincidences are too perfect. The king can't sleep. A record book falls open to the right page. The man building the gallows to hang someone ends up leading the same man through the streets in honor. Esther is a book about the providence of God. A God who's working powerfully even when he's not announcing it loudly. It's also a book about two people who had to decide whether they were going to be faithful when it cost them. So let's get into it. Starting off, we see the setup. Esther becomes queen. The book opens in the Persian court of King Ahasuerus, one of the most powerful rulers in the ancient world. After falling out with his queen, the king holds a massive search for a new queen. And a young Jewish woman named Esther, an orphan raised by her older cousin Mordecai, ends up in that selection. She quickly finds favor with the king. She's chosen as queen, and on Mordecai's advice, she hasn't told anyone she's Jewish. Right away, the book's asking a question it's going to keep asking all the way through. What will you do with the position you've been given? Esther didn't choose to be an orphan. She didn't choose to be Jewish in Persia. She didn't choose to be brought into the king's palace. She didn't maneuver her way to the top. God placed her there. And that's worth thinking about. Because most of us didn't choose the exact situation we're in either. The job, the family, the community, the moment in history. We showed up where God put us. The question Esther raises is, what are you going to do with it? Now we move on to Mordecai, the man who wouldn't bow. A man named Haman gets promoted to the highest position in the kingdom, second only to the king. And the king commands that everyone bow to Haman when he passes. Everyone does, except one man. We read, and all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him, but Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, in Esther 3:2. Day after day the other servants pressure Mordecai, asking, why aren't you doing this? The king commanded it. You're gonna get us all in trouble. Just bow. They asked him daily, and he hearkened not unto them. We read, now it came to pass, when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand. For he had told them that he was a Jew. That's Esther 3:4. Mordecai didn't make a scene. He didn't give speeches. He just wouldn't bow. There's something really powerful in that quiet, daily faithfulness. It wasn't a one-time stand. It was every single day. They pressed him every single day, and every single day he gave the same answer with his posture. No. You've probably felt this kind of pressure at some point in your working life, not necessarily to bow to a person, but to go along with something that you know isn't right, to look the other way, to laugh at things that you shouldn't laugh at, to stay quiet when you should speak, to sign off on something that you know is wrong because everyone else is signing off on it. The pressure's daily, and it builds. People start to notice, and eventually somebody reports it, just like they reported Mordecai to Haman. Mordecai knew the risk. He held the line anyway. And when Haman finds out, he's furious. In Esther 3:5 we read, and when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. One man's refusal to bow sent a powerful man into rage. And that tells you something about how threatening real conviction is to people who are used to controlling everyone around him. Pride can't stand someone who won't feed it. Next up, we see Haman's trap and the weight it puts on Esther. Haman doesn't want to just punish Mordecai. That's not big enough for his ego. He wants to destroy every Jew in the entire Persian Empire. He goes to the king, gets a decree signed, and sends letters through every province on a special date. All Jews are to be killed. When Mordecai hears this, he tears his clothes off, puts on sackcloth, and sits at the king's gate in mourning. Esther finds out and sends messengers to him. He sends back a message that puts everything on her. In chapter 4, verses 13 and 14, we read, "Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, 'Think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this?'" Two things Mordecai says here that cut straight through. First, your position doesn't protect you from the consequences of silence. Esther's the queen. She lives in the palace. She's as safe as anyone can be, and Mordecai tells her flat out, "Don't think your position insulates you. You're not exempt from what's coming." How many people have watched something go wrong at work and thought, "It's not my department, and it's not my responsibility, and I'm not the one who has to deal with it"? Esther was tempted to think the same thing, and Mordecai told her the truth. Second, he points out that God will accomplish his purposes with or without you, but you'll miss your moment. That's one of the most sobering verses in Scripture. Deliverance will arise from another place. God's plan doesn't depend on any one of us, but our moment of purpose does. If Esther stays silent, she loses the moment that she was made for. "And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" And that's the question. That's the whole book in one sentence. The job that you're doing right now, the position, the relationship, the season, what if it's not an accident? What if you're exactly where God put you, and this is the moment he put you there for? Now what happens? Esther steps up. Esther's response is one of the most courageous things in the Bible. To approach the king unsummoned was against Persian law, punishable by death unless the king extended his scepter. But she hasn't been called in 30 days. She asks Mordecai to gather the Jews and fast for 3 days. Then she says this. In Esther 4:16 we read, "Go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish." That's not recklessness. That's a woman who has counted the cost, committed it to prayer, and decided that the work matters more than her safety. She could have told herself the risk was too great. She could have rationalized staying quiet. She had every excuse available for her. Instead, she fasted. She prayed, and then she walked through the door. There's a sequence here worth noting. She didn't sprint into the king's court the moment that she decided to act. She stopped first. She prepared 3 days of fasting and prayer before she moved. The action was bold. The preparation was disciplined. That combination, prayer first, then movement, is a pattern that you see throughout Scripture and people who got it right. So let's talk about God's invisible hand. The sleepless night. Here's where the book of Esther gets really interesting, and here's where the theme of providence becomes impossible to miss. Esther goes to the king. He extends his scepter. She's safe. She invites him and Haman to a banquet, and at the banquet he asks what she wants, and she invites them to a second banquet the next day. She's not ready to ask yet. That night, the night between the two banquets, this happens. On that night could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the king said, "What honor and dignity hath been done to Mordecai for this?" Then said the king's servant that ministered unto him, "There is nothing done for him." Esther 6:1-3. The king can't sleep. Of all the books in the royal library, he calls for the record book. And of all the records in that book, it opens to the account of Mordecai uncovering an assassination plot years earlier. Of all the things the king could ask, he asks whether Mordecai was ever rewarded. And the answer is no. And at that exact moment, Haman is arriving in the outer court to ask permission to hang Mordecai. That's not a coincidence, that's providence. God never announces himself in this book. He doesn't send a prophet. He doesn't split the sea. He gives a king insomnia, and the rest falls into place. Think about your own life for a minute. The phone call that came at exactly the right time, the door that closed and led you somewhere better, the conversation that happened because you happened to be in the right place, the opportunity that looked random but changed everything. We live in a world where God is working constantly, through sleepless nights, through forgotten records, through 1,000 ordinary moments that don't look like miracles until you look back at them. Esther's a reminder that just because you can't see his name on it doesn't mean that he's not in it. And then we see Esther speaks, and Haman falls. At the second banquet, the king asks Esther again what she wants, and this time she speaks. In chapter 7, verses 3 and 4, we read, "Then Esther the queen answered and said, 'If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage.'" The king's furious. He demands to know who's behind this, and Esther points to Haman. And the trap that Haman built for Mordecai, the gallows he constructed in his own yard 50 cubits high to hang the man who wouldn't bow, becomes the instrument of his own destruction. He's hanged on the very gallows that he built. The book of Proverbs says, "The man who digs a pit will fall into it." Haman is one of them. Haman on it. Mordecai is promoted to Haman's position. Esther's people are saved. The Jews defend themselves throughout the empire and prevail. And the Feast of Purim is established, a celebration that Jewish people have observed ever since, to remember the day their enemies' plans were turned back on themselves. So to bring it home, Esther's a short book, just 10 chapters, but it's loaded with God's providence. It's a book about a man who refused to bow every single day, even when the pressure was daily and the cost was real. A man who knew what he believed and wouldn't compromise it for comfort or convenience. It's a book about a woman who had every reason to stay quiet and chose to speak up anyway, who prepared in prayer before she acted, who counted the cost and walked through the door. And it's a book about how God moves through sleepless nights and forgotten record books and perfectly timed conversations. A God who's working constantly in the background of all of our lives, directing things that we can't see, setting up moments that we didn't plan. The two themes run together through the whole book. God's behind the scenes, and you're called to be faithful on the stage. You don't have to see the whole plan to take the next faithful step. Mordecai didn't see what his refusal to bow would set in motion, and Esther didn't know how the king would respond. Neither of them had a guarantee. They just knew what they were supposed to do, and they did it. And that's the call. Be faithful where you are. Trust that God's working, even when He's not loudly announcing it. And if He's put you in a position for a reason, use it. So our challenge of the day. 3 questions that I want you to take with you. 1, is there something that you're being pressured to go along with daily, consistently, that you know isn't right? What would it look like to be a Mordecai in that situation? 2, is there a conversation you've been avoiding because speaking up feels costly? What's the fear that's keeping you quiet? And is it bigger than the reason that you were put in that position? And 3rd, look at where you are right now. Your job, your family, your community, this moment in time. What if it's not an accident? What would you do differently if you believe God put you there for a reason? I want to thank you for tuning in to the Blue Collar Bible Guide podcast. I know we've had a little bit of a break, and we're going to keep marching on, going through the Bible in a year. I want to ask you to please like and subscribe to the podcast and leave a comment below. And I want you to stay in the Word, stay faithful, and remember, just because you can't see His name on it doesn't mean He's not in it. Follow God, do what's right, make great choices, and don't bow to what doesn't deserve it. And I will see you next time.